As you can see, this volume fits well with a lot of the historical themes that the registers covered on class struggle and class strategies. Some of the themes that go back in terms of Miliband and Saville's analysis of laborism, Colin and Leo's studies of corporatism, the studies of the shop steward movement, this historical kind of themes of analysis of new forms of class struggle. One of the things that, since I joined, that we've also covered a lot has been about the U.S. labor left and the labor movement, with essays recently by Joanna Brenner on gender and the working class movement in the U.S. From a year ago, Arun Gupta's piece on the Walmart working class, a range of pieces like this. When I first did a work on editing the Register was actually in 2001 on a volume that dealt with working classes' global realities at a point in time where there was a lot of general discussion about the end of working class politics and so on and so forth. And we put forward the argument there that rather than disappearing, in fact, that since 1975 into the year 2000, of course, the global proletariat had doubled and was now the greatest in terms of numbers in world history. And of course, this has continued. And what was really unprecedented was the forms, the diversity, and the mixture of old and new proletariats that had combined and fused in different ways and was now throwing up through the 2000s different types of new working class organizations, from workplace struggles to the kinds of struggles around migrant rights that, and social reproduction that David and Sue were talking about. And I think what this volume does is really deepen a lot of that type of analysis. In a lot of new cases, a lot of range and depth of coverage that I think is quite unprecedented. And I think it's quite amazing, I think the essays that we've managed to gather over the last 2 years, some, I guess, almost 750 pages of new class on class analysis that explores these themes. When Vivek and I joined Leo as editors of the Socialist Register in 2010, we had put together a 5-year plan on the basis that the crisis that we were in the thick of it at that point in time was not going to go away very quickly, that we were in a period of what David's called a great slump, and a period of, well, different terms to deal with it, permanent austerity, and all the range of things that have formed around quantitative easing, the endless war, and so on. And we put together a plan of 2 volumes on the economic crisis, its causes, its triggers, its dimensions, the forms of resistance that were forming in austerity, around austerity, to try and think that through. A 3rd volume on the question of strategy, and looking at the forms of the socialist movement through the 20th century, the types of resistance that were forming around austerity in the midst of the crisis, and some of the new forms that the left was throwing up, such as the Die Linke, Syriza, and so on and so forth, the range of kind of these new political organizations and movements. These 2 volumes on registering class and transforming class picked up on those themes and tried to give them greater depth and concrete analysis of how this was occurring across the world. I think last year's study was some of the most, last year's volume, which had so much on the ruling classes, from Bill Carroll, Van Apeldoorn, Colin Lees, Claude Servati, was one of the most interesting surveys of the nature and forms of the ruling class as it was coming out of the crisis and beginning to reorganize. And I think this volume does the same thing and registers that some of those same dimensions in terms of working class politics today. And I think it's important, particularly not only the coverage that is there on the U.S. and the forum that Adolf and others are on, dealing with the left and labor in the U.S., but also the global dimensions of this crisis, covering India, China, Africa, and so on, Brazil. So it's just a really remarkable range of essays that are there. we have, in good socialist form, put together been working on another 5-year plan, which I think is not only about thinking and strategizing about the current conjuncture, but also an attempt to think beyond it, beyond just the moments of urgency, and about the futures we need to grapple with. Some of that is some of the themes that we've been working on towards are on what revolution still means, the question of democracy, the ecological dimensions, all the ecological dimensions of what it would mean to live in the 21st century and confronting the ecological crisis. The world turned upside down with a relative shift in the center of world politics out of the north to many of the centers in the south. And the volume that we're working on right now on the right today, which we kick off in mid-February with a panel in town, which I invite people to, on Europe's crisis and the rise of the right, challenges for the left. We have many of the contributors we're working on for the next volume here, some of the most interesting people writing on fascism, the hard right, and so on. Liz Fekete from the Institute of Race Relations in the UK, Richard Seymour from the blog Lenin's Tomb and his book Against Austerity, G.M. Tomasz, one of the most important commentators in Eastern Europe on the rise of the hard right and fascism in Europe, and maybe one of the most important historians writing on fascism and the right, Jeff Ely, very well known for his books on Nazism and the politics in Europe in the 1930s, besides his monumental history of European socialism. So that's what we've got in the future.